Mr. Hughes.
Hello and welcome back to San Juan County Council's Tuesday, September 15, 2020 meeting. We took a short recess. It's now 10:18. We have finished our public hearing regarding the TIP Transportation Improvement Plan. We're now moving to a discussion, county road end parking regulations. Colin Huntimer, sorry, Mr. Stevens, are you on?
Mr. Watson's here.
Thank you, Bill. All right.
Yeah. We haven't heard from Mr. Stevens yet.
All right, we'll wait a few minutes until Mr. Stevens is back so we can get started. Mr. Hunter, you are available, correct?
I'm here. I'm ready.
I'm here. I just couldn't. I don't know what's going on with my screens today, but
Oh, no problem. I just want to make sure
couldn't
you
find the unmute or the camera or anything. So
All right, well, sorry about that. Mr. Huntimer, again, if you wouldn't mind giving a discussion regarding the county road end parking regulations, that would be great.
Hello, Council. Colin Huntimer, County Engineer.
Colin, can I interrupt you for a second? I just want to, so the document that you're looking at, Mr. Stevens, that you cannot see the screen, is that correct?
no, I can see the screen now, but I don't have this document in my packet.
Mr. Huntimer, do we have a copy of this?
No, I was actually working on this yesterday. Yesterday. So no, this is
Council after today, correct?
I'm sorry, what?
If you wouldn't mind today forwarding it to Ingrid or forwarding it to council, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Colin, County Public Works, and here to talk about parking regulations in county roads. And my understanding is that council has received a few complaints about disruptive activities at a few of our county road ends, and I've been asked to report on how potential new parking regulations could be implemented to alleviate the purported problems. Just real quickly, we'll look at existing parking regulations in the county, and then also real quickly take a look at existing state laws regarding parking on county roads. And then I don't intend to, but I do have a review of other counties' regulations if council is interested after those two items. So currently, San Juan County Code 1016, we have, I could bring this up, but we have parking regulations in 4 areas of the county. The first one's at the Orcas and Lopez ferry lanes, which are on county roads. And essentially that regulation says that there shall be no unattended vehicles in the ferry lanes, and that's to prevent disruptions during Washington State Ferries operations. And then we have 3 other areas. In Hunter Bay Marine Facility, we regulate parking in the Islandale subdivision by permit, and that's tied to our dock, float, and gangway boat ramp there. And then also in Roach Harbor at the marine facility, the county leases land for parking, and we also regulate parking there by permit. And both of these functions are ongoing in County Public Works, and they have been for many years. The fourth one, in Orcas Village, county code allows for time-restricted parking in Orcas Village generally. And there are a number of signs throughout the village, and I have pictures of those if council's interested, where we limit parking short-term for load, unload, and other activities tied to the commercial activities and the ancillary parking right next to the ferry dock. These are the areas where we have current parking regulations that we just talked about. And there's a few other county regulations of note that might pertain to road ends leading to water. Council is probably very familiar with the noise ordinance. That's the quiet hours of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. That's civil code, $20 fine. And then of course, there is camping restrictions, and this was discussed a number of years ago regarding encampments and those types of activities, but it also does cover sleeping in vehicles in public places, which would apply at county road ends leading to water. So not directly tied to parking, but also it would affect activities at county road ends leading to water. Just one slide on the state. The sheriff's office can obviously remove a vehicle if it is a traffic hazard, and if it's not a traffic hazard and it's unattended, it can be tagged and removed in after 24 hours. Of course, you can't park in traffic lanes, and if the road has a fog stripe, the white stripe, which clearly delineates the traffic lanes, you could park outside of the white stripe along any county road, absence of a no parking sign. And of course, if we see that throughout the year, if someone pulls over to go look at an eagle or a deer, if they're off the roadway, if they're not obstructing traffic, you can park along a county road. Of course, you can't park on a sidewalk either, and that primarily applies to East Sound. There is a little bit of authority for the county's traffic engineer to erect no parking signs, but those are very limited in nature, and this department only can do no parking signs when it applies directly to safety. So if the no parking signs is necessary to ensure the safe travel of vehicles and pedestrians on the county road, I have the authority to erect those. I can't recall the last time we've installed a new sign under that authority. But if the no parking is desired for the function of the road or the character of the road, and it's not tied to safety, that requires council action. So council action is essentially required for time parking or anything that doesn't pertain to the safety of traveling public on county roads. That is, I have a few pictures here. So the two areas that I was informed, just a moment here. So this is our county road, and on North Beach Road, this is probably a better shot. So this is on the north side of Orcas. This is a county road right-of-way leading to water. And on the north end of it, there is some parking here. That's 343 at 342. Excuse me. There's some parking here to provide access to the beaches, and then also just west of here on another county road end, which I don't have a good photo, which is Blanchard Road. There's a similar amenity there. I do have some photos. Not very good. This is the road end on Blanchard. Again, there's just an area at the road where vehicles can park and they can walk down a pedestrian path to get down to the beach. Again, unsigned, unregulated parking. So just general observations. Any kind of parking regulations would obviously necessitate a discussion with the sheriff's office to talk about enforcement and their capacity to ensure compliance. There would also need to be a discussion with council about what kind of penalties or monetary you would like to implement with the parking. There are always the unintended consequences of installing new signage. Bring up one more photo again. If we were to, this is again North Beach Road, if we were to regulate parking on North Beach Road and sign this, excuse me, my computer's. If we were to regulate parking here, there always is the unintended consequence that if you can't park here, that you would just move the parking further down the road and park along the shoulder, which is, of course, less desirable than parking here. Restricting parking here can be a limiter to public access if, especially for those who are able-bodied, or it prefers those who are able-bodied or live within walking distance for nighttime celestial type activities. If we were to restrict parking here to daylight hours only, there are people who like to do stargazing, look at comets, full moons, other types of activities. And if you can't park here during those twilight hours, then it certainly prefers able-bodied or people who live in this neighborhood as opposed to other people that have to drive down here and could no longer park at the road end. Of course, I would be interested to know if this is a precedent-setting activity, since we don't have a lot of parking regulations at road ends. Is this something that would be looking to just a select example, and then maybe there's going to be other requests to implement this at other road ends? And what kind of policy are we setting? And then the last comment here is something that always comes up in everything we do, which is rural character. And there's very few signage at these locations, and there's always a discussion about the trade-off of these signs can be viewed as something that's detrimental to rural character. And that's the short amount of material that I have prepared for council to start this discussion. Again, I believe it's based off of a number of concerns council has received regarding a few of our road ends.
So Colin,
back over to you, Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, so Colin, thank you very much. The reason I brought this forward was more of a, let's tie it with the sound ordinance or the noise ordinance, so that we would look at this not in specific locations like North Beach or Blanchard Road, but it would be something we would consider at all of our road ends, that there be no overnight parking. So I don't know, but we talked about this a couple times earlier, and I thought I heard interest in council to look at this. Is there interest in council to look at this?
When we talked about parking at road ends, it was about access to the water more than about the parking or not parking. I'm trying to figure out what the issue is, and if that's something that's just an enforcement issue. If people are making noise on the beach at 10 o'clock at night, then that would be a sheriff's call. So I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to solve or how we're trying to solve it.
Well, I thought we've had a couple discussions the last couple of weeks where we mentioned that both for the private property owners as well as for access, we were looking at some ways to improve the road end. I mean, I get complaints on Orcas, and maybe it's an Orcas thing, regarding overnight parking at the road ends on multiple areas. And so the thought was, if there was countywide or specifically these two areas that you couldn't leave your car there overnight, that it might make it a little bit easier after hours for folks that live in the neighborhoods. I apologize. I thought, Jamie, that you were on board with talking about this. I thought we brought it up twice, and I thought I had a head nod from you that it's something you were interested in listening to. So,
well, I'm fine with listening to it. I'm just, if people are parking there overnight, are they camping in their car or are they camping on the beach? Either one of those are illegal activities.
Sometimes in this specific location, people leave their car for several days and go over to Susha by kayak.
Oh, I see.
And there's no way, and the same thing with Blanchard Road, and there's no way to enforce it right now, because technically you can leave a car on a right-of-way for 72 hours, I think. Is that correct, Colin?
That's a little bit of a misnomer. The sheriff's office has the ability to tag and remove vehicles that are unattended in as little as 24 hours. But our culture here is not to be that proactive in enforcement, and so the 72 hours thing is probably in practice more of what the sheriff has as an unwritten policy. But again, it's removal of an unintended vehicle from a highway, and the sheriff's office can tag it, and then after it's tagged, can impound it after 24 hours after it's tagged. But there is no, that's not used programmatically. And quite honestly, I don't think it's a very useful tool to regulate parking. If you're trying to regulate parking at a road end, you should probably give a more defined structure than just the blanket removing unattended vehicles, which applies everywhere. And it's meant to essentially get rid of somebody who abandons a car along county road. And it's not a very good tool to regulate parking at a road end, in my opinion.
Mr. Watson, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't like the idea of, vehicles parking for an extended period of time at the road end. Hadn't thought about I'm going to park here and load my kayaks and go kayak for a weekend up in some remote island. Hadn't thought about that scenario. So it's, I just, and I have empathy for I'll call it the neighbors who, property owners that are right there. But then, the road and the parking spaces have been there for like ever. So, and we have our noise and other ordinances that can deal with nuisances. Interesting question. And I'm not aware of any issues on San Juan of similar nature. Or on Lopez. Can you, Jamie, on Lopez, similar?
Well, I think what happens is when we try to actually, like Jesse had a really good program going, wasn't well received by people who were by a road end, but of marking where the, public pathways were.
Right.
And there's a lot of them on Lopez. There's a lot, he had a map. There's a lot on, I don't know if there's a lot on Orcas, but, some of them, it's a road end, but it's a 60-foot cliff after that.
Right.
So it's usually when people are actually using their right to access the water that we get that we get complaints.
Right. And at trailheads.
Yeah.
There's at least 5 places, different parts of Orcas, where this is an issue. North Beach, Blanchard, West Beach, the Madrona Point turnaround, and the new Deer Harbor bridge. There's an area of parking.
I guess my question is it just they just don't like the cars there? That's where it's like Bill's saying on this current example, the parking's been there forever. Is it just that the people are taking these little trips, or that's what I'm
saying? You have a really
small, if we do this, there's a lot of places that this would impact.
Right.
There is a small area that is open to the public, and many people are utilizing it, especially now in COVID, because it's an opportunity to be outside somewhere. And it is causing a lot of disruption to neighbors on either side when people aren't sticking to the boundaries of the county right-of-way. So this was a thought to maybe add a little bit of balance to the neighbors and the people visiting, so that after 10 o'clock at night when the noise ordinance kicks in, it would be a tool for the deputies to come down and try to maintain a balance between the visitors and the neighbors. It was a request specifically from several different community members on Orcas.
Right.
On different
so
parts.
Again, is it an enforcement issue of people trespassing off of the county land, or is it the parking specifically?
Well, I think it's both.
Or is it the noise?
I think it's many things. There's complaints about people leaving. There's no one solution to this problem. People don't like neighbors. You shouldn't leave a car for 4 days and go kayaking, but we have no way to enforce that.
Right.
You shouldn't leave a car and camp on the beach, but there's no way to enforce that.
Well, we have no camping on the beach.
Go ahead, Bill.
I say we have no, we don't allow camping on the beach.
Okay. There's a lot of issues with road ends for both public access as well as for the neighbors who live next to it.
Right.
Right.
And I think this just falls underneath the,
a balance to maybe appease the neighbors a little bit, have a little bit of structure there that could provide them, and at the same point that it might lessen their desire to be frustrated with people walking in front of their houses.
Yeah, but Rick, I think we're also facing this, where the adjoining property owners almost treat the road end like theirs, right?
That isn't the case at North Beach.
No, I understand that, right? But I'm just saying, so there's that, I'll call it the flip side to the argument, which is, well, the road end is not private property. The road end is public property, and it is supposed to provide public access to the shoreline. So, and we want to enable that.
I'm not asking to limit any public access. I'm an advocate for public access to our road ends and fully support that.
I know
I'm
that.
asking for a balance when I'm getting many complaints from neighbors about what's going on, multiple calls to the sheriff's department on big weekends, and thought this might be a balanced way to, again, lessen some of the frustration from the neighbors, still provide public access, and give another tool to the sheriff for enforcement.
Right.
I don't know what's being proposed, though, for this balance. I mean, Colin brought up a good point. If North Beach actually has parking there and we do something and the parking just moves to a worse place, have we accomplished what you wanted to get accomplished, Rick?
Well, and maybe we need to hear from the sheriff as to what he needs to be able to keep the peace, so to speak.
That's probably a good idea.
And Mr. Stevens, to your point, this is Colin, Public Works, is that this is a side street here, that if you regulate parking here, what you wouldn't want is people to just start parking on the shoulder here, which is allowed.
Yep.
Or we could put up signs here if council delegated the authority or the request to put up signs here, but then all of a sudden now you're having signs that just kind of spread out with tendrils just trying to regulate parking here. I'm just wary of the unintended consequences. I just want to make sure that I share with you not just my observations, but the observations I received from other counties, including Whatcom and Skagit, when I tried to reach out to them regarding time restrictions and parking.
And what did you find out?
Along the things of which I said, so things which were very difficult for rural counties to implement and doesn't exist in Skagit or Whatcom or Island is like 3-hour parking, because we don't have a parking officer who walks around and chalks the tires. So you can't, those things become unenforceable. Unless you live in a really urban setting in a city where someone's full-time job is walking around chalking tires, really the only thing you can regulate easily is whether there's parking or no parking, with the one option that other counties do is no overnight parking. So they basically, at sundown, all the vehicles have to leave. But the unintended consequence to that is that there are some people in the greater neighborhood who do like to do nighttime beach activities, like look at a full moon or go sit and stare at the Milky Way. And if you're not able-bodied or don't live in the neighborhood and you would just drive out there at 11 o'clock at night to watch the comet, you couldn't do that if there was no parking after 10 o'clock. And that's just an unfortunate consequence of trying to, again, limit activities at the road end to daylight hours only. What else did I find? I found that San Juan County, once again, is one of these that has this problem more prevalent, not a problem, excuse me, that's a bad word, but this scenario is extremely prevalent in San Juan County, and it's just not so much in the other counties. So, for instance, Skagit County has an area where they have no overnight parking, but it's along Old Highway 99 and I forget the other name of the road, where it's like a informal park and ride. So in that case, it makes sense that, you know, it's a widened shoulder, and I think I actually have that.
And again, Colin, what I was thinking we could do is no parking after 10 p.m. to match up with our noise ordinance.
Yeah, here is a. This is an example. This is the closest example, Mr. Hughes, that I could find to what you're talking about, and this is on Whatcom County, and this is a widened shoulder in a residential neighborhood, and they have a sign here. I'm not sure if you can read this, but it says day use only, no parking, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I think that's consistent with our noise ordinance. No alcohol, no loud music. In my travels yesterday trying to find examples, this was the closest one I could find, and it's this stretch of shoulder along in Birch Bay in Whatcom County.
Well, that's exactly the intent.
Sure. Yeah. I'm. That and they have many different. That was the closest I could find. They have no parking on a shoulder.
So, where is there long-term parking in East Sound?
Well, technically there isn't. I mean, there's parking in East Sound on private property or on the roads, on the side of the road, and the parking spaces in town. And actually, Colin, could you go back to the picture of North Beach?
Yes.
So the property owner with the tennis court had offered that for a small fee to provide parking there to the public.
Right. Well, I was just trying to figure out where somebody would park if they wanted to launch kayaks at North Beach for, for several days.
Oh, well, I mean, what you would, depending on if you're going solo, you could come launch and then drive, a mile into town and just leave your car in the commercial core on the side of the road, in one of the parking spaces, then walk back. You could go to Brant's Landing and leave your car. They have a paid parking area there. Or if you're working with one of the guide companies, again, pre-COVID, they could launch the kayak or leave it on the beach and then take you to park at their facility and then bring you back.
Right.
I mean, there are options. It just takes longer time. You could also park at the port, which is closer than town, if you wanted.
Okay.
So I'm not hearing much interest in taking this any further. Is that correct?
Not at this time.
All right. Colin, thank you very much for your time on this.
Okay. Thank you, Council.
So our next discussion point is a COVID-19 coronavirus emergency response update. Mark and Kyle, are you on the phone?
Yes, and I'm going to turn it over to Kyle.
And Mark, real quick, or Mike, I'm not sure how this is going. There has been some CARES funding updates. So when this emergency response update is given, be interesting to learn more about the funding opportunities that are here. And if it's anyone, I didn't ask you to do this, but if there's any health advice or information regarding the smoke that's presently in our county, that would be helpful after the update as well, if that's all right with council.
Yep.
Great. Good morning, Council. Kyle Dodd, Environmental Health Manager. So it's been a couple weeks since we've last met and provided an update. I'm going to go over the high points. Situationally, the state has 80,485 cases. Locally, we are holding at 32 positive cases. Our last case was on August 9th. So it's been over 5 weeks since our last positive here. And despite the lack of new cases here, we have been working on quite a few things as a team. The first thing I will mention is Health Officer Order number 9 that was signed by Dr. James and effective last Thursday, the 10th. So this health officer order did several things. One, it repealed the 50% limit on transient accommodations. So now our hotel, motel, vacation rental, mortgage, and camping is now open at 100%. It modified the cleaning and disinfection guidelines for transient accommodations. So you'll recall that under the previous health officer order that there was a 24-hour vacant period in between stays. That has been reduced to 6 hours between guest stays, and windows required to be open during those 6 hours, and rooms vacant for 2 hours prior to sending cleaning staff in. And the last major point in that health officer order is pertaining to public playgrounds and playground equipment. Those facilities are now open as long as we remain in phase 2. Other work that's going on, huge administrative lift for the finance and admin section as they work through reimbursement requests from our various funding sources. So Tara, Christine, and Peter are working to satisfy FEMA documentation requests, and also continuing to update our CARES and other funding source expenditure estimation, trying to maximize allocation and still meet deadlines across those many funding sources. So a lot of work ongoing in that area of reimbursement request submittal. Testing capacity, an update there. As you'll recall, I mentioned we're trying to increase testing capacity through a contract with Northwest Labs that we have signed. They are the lab that we have been using for all of our testing, but they have a new online web page portal called Test Directly that we are working to gain access to greatly reduce the administrative burden of the COVID testing events. So that'll help immensely with scheduling, consenting to testing, and also the results notification once we receive test results. So that's ongoing as well. Countywide COVID vaccination response, logistic and staffing planning is underway as well, and we're working through that simultaneously with our seasonal flu clinic planning this year, as we see those two pairing very well as far as the plans and administration of those that we need. And then we have this kind of plays into the where we are going from here. There has been a call scheduled Wednesday afternoon. I know that we routinely get questions about where are we at in the Safe Start program, and when is the governor planning on allowing counties to move through those steps. So there is a call scheduled Wednesday afternoon to talk about where the state's at with counties progressing through that Safe Start reopening plan, and it sounds like there may be some changes to that. One of the other things I wanted to mention was related to our health officer orders, and there have been many John Kane's efforts in drafting and reviewing that language to ensure the intent is both legal and defensible has been invaluable, and in this latest round, we sincerely appreciate his participation there as well. The last thing that I had planned was we've identified as one of our objectives is to identify long-term personal protective equipment storage, and we have generated a proposal to upgrade the Emergency Operations Center at the Maribo building on the fairgrounds. That is our primary plan for long-term PPE storage, to upgrade that building and close in a portion of that. And we have generated a proposal for that will come before you at some point with other departmental requests for CARES funding as well. But just wanted to mention that briefly to give a heads up on that. I will click over here quickly to go through both the governor's dashboard and the State Department of Health dashboard. So here we are on the governor's dashboard and the epidemiologic curve. So as I've mentioned before, we are working our way down the backside of the second peak. We have flattened a little bit here over the last couple weeks, and that is outside of King and Pierce and Spokane counties, who are still seeing quite a few cases generated each day. Whitman County also popped up on the radar as a county that is seeing, over the last several days, 50 to 60 new cases, and since August 20th, they have had over 900 new cases in that county. So can certainly sympathize with them as a small county with limited resources. But that corresponded with the return of students to campus there. So a few more additional cases generated each day has prompted this kind of flattening of our trajectory down the backside of that second peak. And then finally, just clicking over to the DOH dashboard, and I've highlighted San Juan County. We are meeting all of the current metrics that are identified by state DOH as far as progressing through phases, and they currently don't have the testing rate populated for our county or any other counties. I think that they are in the process of updating that metric, so their system has that offline, but we have been meeting that in prior weeks. So with that, I will certainly take any questions related to COVID response.
Mr. Stevens, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Mr. Watson?
Yeah, Kyle. So you mentioned flu vaccinations. When are those going to start?
Yeah, so we are. Mark, is that you?
Yeah, you want me to jump in, Kyle?
Please do.
Okay. So on the flu vaccination, there's several things going on. The CDC this year and others are coming out and actually encouraging folks to get their flu vaccinations now. And so the Peace Health And Eventide on this island, as well as our pharmacy, are currently providing immunizations for flu. And the other effort that we're working on this island is working as a medical group or team. So us, the pharmacy, Eventide, and Peace Health to plan and schedule some drive-through clinics that will be happening hopefully in the October timeframe. So that's the efforts on this island. As far as Lopez go, the pharmacy is doing tremendous work over there, and they're scheduled some drive-through clinics along with their EMS folks. Our plan is to at least participate in one of those and work with some of the younger populations. And we are in discussions with AmPresent and others on Orcas, trying to figure out what we're doing there. Flu vaccinations are currently occurring. We are, as our department, looking to those large-scale drive-through clinics as a way to meet the demand. And part of that is due to our staffing levels, and also the clinic on Orcas is currently being remodeled, so we don't have a space on Orcas to provide flu immunizations. But people are getting their flu immunizations now. There are appointments available in a variety of locations, and we'd encourage people to, particularly this year, but any year, is to get their flu vaccinations as soon as possible.
And then I think Kyle mentioned that we're prepping for a potentiality of a COVID vaccine.
Yeah, correct. So, and Dr. James can probably talk to more than this, but there are multiple different flu vaccines, or not flu, COVID vaccines that are currently in the phase 3 trials, with best guess having those available late this year or early next year. The idea behind it is if we can work as this medical group, this team, and have successful drive-through clinics for flu, we can replicate that for the COVID-19 vaccination when it's available.
Okay, thank you.
I'll get some more detail about that in a minute, Bill.
Any further questions for Mark or Kyle?
I have one, Rick. Kyle, this morning you said there was some meeting tomorrow with the governor's office, and my connection wasn't that great on the briefing call. Do you know what to expect coming out of that, or?
Well, that was a meeting invite from Secretary of Health, and there were several items on that agenda, and one of the items was the Safe Start reopening revamp. So we expect to hear something in that meeting regarding what the current thoughts are as far as the different phases and reopening, and or what the new process will look like for counties to apply to move between phases. That's as far out as my crystal ball goes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
The other thing I would add, Jamie, is I know the governor is doing a press conference later today, this afternoon, and is going to be touching on not only the wildfires and the smoke, but also I think giving an update on COVID is what I've heard. So,
Yeah. Okay.
All right, is there anything else for Mark or Kyle? All right, Dr. James, were you wanting to provide an update?
If I could, as usual, Mark and Kyle have covered a lot of the turf already. A couple things I know it's been mentioned sometimes, but I want to bring it up one more time, is that Kyle did a great job over the summer of getting the air quality monitors in place on each of the major islands. They are up and running. That data can be accessed by anybody at purpleair.com, and it's a very simple interface, and you just get the numbers with little round circles. But if you go down to either of the boxes, you can actually expand that dramatically. You can have graphs of all the real-time measurements. You can created in 10-minute, 30-minute longer intervals, and you can see the actual level as it changes in very much minute to minute. It not only has our monitors on it, but it's got a bunch of other private monitors, some actually in the San Juan, so there are more data points than just the 3 that we put in. But I think that's a real significant step forward in our ability to manage these wildfire smoke events and look at the impacts. The impacts are real. People could die from this level of exposure. And I think that we need to be careful. We need to be indoors. I've got asthma. I wake up in the middle of the night struggling to breathe. And I'm sure other asthmatics are doing that same thing. And that's with a HEPA filter running in the house. So I think that's a big step forward to have that real-time monitoring available to anybody that wants to access it. Very, very helpful. And Kyle, thank you for doing that. The other thing I mentioned is I have been involved with the University of Washington, my capacity there. I have been asked to to identify and involve minority groups such as tribal communities in the vaccine trials. So I've been involved in one trial. There are 2 more trials that we're considering being part of. In that respect, I can tell you there are 9 trials now in phase 3. Phase 1 looks at safety, phase 2 looks at efficacy, phase 3 looks at big numbers on those same 2 issues. So there'll be tens of people in the first study, the phase 1, hundreds of people in phase 2, maybe a few thousand. And then in phase 3, that's about 30,000 people in each of these studies. Some significant adverse events that can cause morbidity or mortality occur only about 1 in 10,000 times. So you have to get this 30,000 number to get good data. There won't be conclusive data from phase 3 trials until probably at the earliest the end of December. Some of the things you might hear in the press, I think, are misleading. There may be, both China and Russia have released prematurely vaccines and are using them in China in the military, in Russia, interestingly, in school teachers and healthcare providers. But these are vaccines that can have potentially very serious side effects. The vaccine we're working with, the AstraZeneca vaccine, has actually been put on pause because they have a case of transverse myelitis, which means the interruption of neurologic transmission between the brain and the body. It's a big deal. It's happened one time in this trial, and it happened one time before in a phase 2 study. Those are big deals, and there are things that will bring even $1 billion study to a screaming halt until it's fully understood if it's related to the vaccine or not. So those kind of studies have to be completed before a vaccine is safe. Right now, we anticipate of the 9 vaccines, at least 2 or 3 to finish these studies that looking at safety and efficacy by the end of December, early January. And so in terms of the horizon we're looking at, in terms of where we're going, it's going to be when that vaccine becomes available, we're going to be able to stop doing what we're doing and really go back to a much more normal life. I anticipate one of the things the federal government did is they've allocated literally $1 billion to these vaccine development pharmaceutical companies beyond their own funding. And they've done that in order for those vaccines to be manufactured even before the studies are done. They're not being distributed beyond the study, but they're being manufactured, which would have delayed the vaccine many more months. So over this time, they're actually producing the vaccine. They may have to throw $1 billion worth of work away, but that's the price of accelerating the vaccine availability by months. So we will likely have 2 or 3 vaccines available, I think, in January. I think that's a fairly safe thing to say. I think we'll get good uptake. They're making about 10 million doses a month in each of these. And it's not just the 300 million people in America. They're making them for everybody in the world. So it's going to be an allocation process when they do become available, probably the highest risk people first. There are 2 strategies. You vaccinate high-risk people or people most likely to transmit. Those are different groups. It may be a mix of those 2 priorities. Suffice to say, I'm happy to keep you informed. I am staying up on that. We are implementing a vaccine trial with 2 of our local tribes, the Nuksek and the Lummi are probably going to fully participate in this. We're actually boots on the ground getting things done right now on it. But it is what will allow us to go back to a normal life, and it is on a horizon in a very realistic way within months, not years. The other thing I wanted to talk briefly about is that the whole phase progression that we have through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 has changed a little bit. What's happened is that some of the things that I thought were important to bring forward and do in phase 2, but we're in phase 3 that I talked about, libraries and museums being open, some other things. What the governor's done is he's gone forward, he's brought those down into phase 2. So we're able to do those things even though they were in phase 3, now they're in phase 2. And I think hopefully the governor is going to be presenting a much more sophisticated approach than this simple phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 thing. And I'm looking forward to his comments and a kind of a reinvigorated and perhaps more flexible and more locally applicable set of rules that we can continue to move forward. As you know, one of the big things is that I changed the orders so that now 100% occupancy for our transient accommodations and camping. I think we're at a place where it's safe to do that. I think we've got the infrastructure at the county to be on any case that occurs and limit community spread. I think the decrease in the tourist travel makes that a possible thing right now and a reasonable thing to do. It does put a lot more burden on our system, though. We have to be ready to go, and we have to stop any spread before it becomes community spread. And we're prepared to do that. If we can't do it, we'll need to take a step back. But for now, I'm confident that this is a reasonable thing to be doing at this point in time. The next big bump in the road is going to be when schools open. Schools opening, they've got these numbers of so many per 100,000. Of course, we don't have 100,000 people here, so if we have one case, it's amplified considerably, and that standard isn't very useful for us. What I've done is take a regional approach, because I think because essential travel only isn't a respected thing and hasn't been enforced or enforceable, we actually have a lot of regional exposure here. Even beyond, we have international exposure here. So I'm creating some numbers and working with the school districts to find a metric that we can use and be comfortable with. I think over the next couple of months, we are going to see the schools begin to do some in-person education, the public schools. As you all know, the private schools have gone down that path very quickly. And we'll see how well they can do with that. I made recommendations and not orders about that because I think there needs to be some flexibility. I don't think it's kind of one size fits all. I don't think I can make an order that will give a better result than simply recommending what to do and watching a variety of approaches emerge. As soon as we get more information from other school districts' successes and failures, we'll know better what to do and how to do it here. And as the numbers come down regionally, I think we'll be moving that forward kind of one small step at a time till we get everybody back in school. So those are the highlights that I wanted to mention. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Stevens?
You're on mute, Amy.
Sorry. No, I don't have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Watson?
No questions. Thank you, Dr. James.
Thank you, Dr. James.
Well, I want to thank all of you. I think your leadership has been really important in getting us where we're at. We remain at 32, no deaths. I mean, that's an achievement you can all be proud of in your leadership, guiding us through some very, very difficult times at the policy level. I really appreciate it. Obviously, also appreciative of our team at the Health Department and the EOC. Thank you very much. Let's continue. I'm looking forward to ongoing continued success. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Dr. James. Mr. Thomas, at this point, there had been some new information regarding some funding that's come from the CARES Act for the county. Is this the point where you would like to have that discussion or later in the day?
I think it could depend onto the current conversation. So, so the county got 2 allotments of CARES money, and so you may remember there's been quite a conversation at the city and county level about the state allocating some remaining CARES funding, and they finally did that. So what it means for the county is that we got $343,000 via Commerce and $343,000 via Department of Health. And so working on the paperwork for both of those additional grant amounts. So the internal conversation is the same as it has been, is where can we spend the money? And so first and foremost, it focuses on our COVID-19 response. So I don't really have any answers on how that money is going to be spent. I will say that there's obviously an eye towards the current expense fund and paying for expenses that have come out of that fund first and foremost. A week or so ago, I sent out a request to departments for what I call a round 2 request for expenditures. So if you remember, there was a round 1 where departments asked for a variety of things as part of the COVID-19 response, or accommodating staffing, public interface, those types of things. So I don't have a tally or a sum of what round 2 looks like, but I'm working on that. So not much in the way of answers or direction for council this time, but just wanted to make you aware that we got the additional money from Commerce and are trying to figure out how to expend that money. There's a little bit longer calendar. Originally, we were to have the money expended by the end of October, but that is now end of November. So there's good news. We have additional money to spend, so we need to figure out how to spend that. During Commander Kyle's presentation, he mentioned some additions at the fairgrounds for the EOC. So if we have additional money and can spend money on augmenting the EOC at the fairgrounds, then perhaps there's an opportunity to do that in a project to be accomplished. So there'll be more information on that pending. But I guess at this point, happy to entertain any questions from council. I know Ms. Anderson is on the phone. I'm going to answer some specific accounting questions that council may have.
Mr. Watson?
Yeah, so where are we relative to the original $943,000? Have we submitted reimbursement requests for that full amount yet, or are we in flight?
So this is Tara Anderson, EOC Finance and Admin Chair, County Senior Budget Analyst. In terms of reimbursements that have already been submitted, we have not submitted against our CARES Act funding yet. We did prepare a FEMA submittal. That is looking to be about $110,000 that we'll reclaim there. As far as the CARES spending, we have incurred roughly $862,000 worth of expenses through the end of August on our response. The majority of that, 72%, is direct public health response activity. So those expenses that I'm quoting there, we anticipate 100% reimbursement on. And so also wanted to clarify a couple other things that Mr. Thomas mentioned. We did, just as we've been in this council session, received our amendment with the additional dollars on the CARES Act. We're happy to say that they have actually extended that date until December 15th. So that does give us a little bit of extra breathing room in which to cover and administer our financial accounting and to cover some of our costs there. In addition to the $343,000 that we'll be getting from the local government CARES and another $343,000 from the Department of Health CARES, there has been some other targeted funds for disease control, health and statistics, contact tracing pieces. And so overall, as far as what we're anticipating from the combination of Department of Health, CARES funding, extensions and additions on contracts, and the FEMA funding, we're roughly at about $2 million of anticipated CARES support to support our public health response and our local government costs. That does exclude things that are specific for housing, that excludes things that are specific for elections, that excludes things that are specific to the courts. So I really, when I'm using that $2 million number, I'm talking about the public health response and the local government relief that we have. Did that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Stevens?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
So I have one quick question. With this new money that's coming in, is it possible, or are we considering reaching out to some of the nonprofits for consideration? Or is that even eligible from the reimbursement side?
Yeah, I think we're definitely looking right now at what we can do to further make sure that we're meeting first our public health, our local county public health response costs first. And so after those estimates are completed, we'll see what extra funding is available for the additional department requests to meet our local government requirements. And then what funding might be available to extend to a broader county response. Due to timing, I think we're going to be looking at, what costs were incurred already within the community that we can support, that we have wanted to support all along and haven't had the funds to do. And if we can free up some of those to do so, then we can look at that.
Great, thank you. Anything else regarding this new? This is really great news for the community and for the county. Very exciting. Thank you to all who have worked so hard on this in this process, and I think this will be much needed aid in the next few months. Is there any questions from either council member regarding this funding at this point?
Not for me.
Not for me.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for bringing that forward. I appreciate that. Moving on, our next discussion item is comprehensive plan update status and work in progress with Eric Shook, Director of Community Development. See, Eric, are you on the line?
Yes, I am here. This is Erica Shook, Director of Community Development. And I just have a PowerPoint that I will share that just goes over what we're doing and where we're at on the comprehensive plan. So I'm going to start sharing that. So hopefully you can all see my screen.
Yep.
We're still working on the comprehensive plan update. We are working through the land use element at this point, and we've just really begun the start of that. And we are starting to tackle some of the larger policy issues from the policy list that you and the Planning Commission worked on last fall. So the Planning Commission this upcoming Friday, the last meeting they talked about farm worker housing, and they're still, I think, formulating some recommendations on that. The idea with farm worker housing is to make it a little bit easier. Our agricultural community has told us that the current regulations are too difficult. And we haven't seen anybody doing farm worker housing, so it does lend to the idea that they're difficult. Some of the other issues that we're working on are rural residential cluster developments. Two issues with those, really. The first one is there's been a longstanding recommendation and a policy in our comp plan to make those clusters larger. So they're discussing that. And then we haven't had a lot of rural cluster developments used for affordable housing. They're an affordable housing tool. And we think that part of that reason is because they're limited to the density bonuses associated with them are limited simply to use by existing nonprofit housing providers. And so we're talking or discussing the idea of opening that up to anybody, any developer to use, provided that those units created remain affordable. And of course, affordable housing is one of the really big issues that we face in this county. Accessory dwelling units are something that has come up in two areas. We got a lot of public comment when we did our out in the public, when we did our outreach in 2018. about how difficult it is to do accessory dwelling units, and that our regulations are difficult with a lottery and distance between, you can only have your ADU can only be 100 feet from your regular house, and there's some requirements there. And then we have the affordable housing strategy adopted by council that recommended looking at those regulations to see if there was a way that they could be made easier to, or they could be relaxed a little bit. So we have put some issue discussions out there for the Planning Commission. It's a difficult subject for us because it's been the subject of litigation. So for most of these, we have proposed some recommendations from the department. In terms of accessory dwelling units, we feel like it would be subject of expensive litigation. So we think it's important to have the discussion, but ultimately council will give us direction on where to go with that. But that is sort of the key component of that discussion. So probably the biggest issue discussion really is, I think, vacation rentals. We've had a lot of comment from East Sound, the group that's on Orcas Island or countywide about vacation rentals. And Deer Harbor has also given us some comments about vacation rentals in their community. And ultimately, council asked us to look at the saturation or the total numbers of vacation rentals countywide. So that's on the agenda. Planning Commission has a really big agenda. They haven't gotten to this yet. And we've provided some options for discussion. And it could be any of the options that we provided that they recommend. It could be something else. But some of the options that we've put out there and given them some analysis on are a lottery with annual cap on numbers, just a cap on the total number of vacation rentals, or possibly limiting vacation rentals within East Sound or the urban growth areas because the lots are smaller there, and then so the smaller lots result in a concentration of activity. And then limits within other sub-areas. For example, the Deer Harbor Planning Committee has recommended that their vacation rentals not be allowed, or no further vacation rentals not be allowed within Hamlet residential. So to take a breath, somehow when I'm presenting here, I get going too fast. And so if you've got any questions about these, I'm happy to answer them. The final thing that we're starting to work on is the natural resource lands methodology. As you recall, when we had the Thurman redesignation, that was a redesignation of land from forest resource to rural form forest that was overturned by the Growth Management Hearings Board. And what they told us was that in order for us to look at our forest resource and ag lands, and we're required to do this under the Growth Management Act, we have to conduct a county-wide analysis of agricultural and forest resource lands of long-term commercial significance. So Adam and Dan over in GIS are putting together a methodology for doing the analysis through GIS. And we are talking about the methodology with the Planning Commission this Friday. We're not talking about the results, just how we're going to do the work. So if you've got any questions, I do have more information. The Planning Commission packet is available at this link. You can all go there, pull all the documents. They're all on the web. But if you've got any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Mr. Watson.
No questions at this time. Thank you, Erica.
Mr. Stevens.
I don't have any questions, but I want to thank you. It seems the things that you're including here to the Planning Commission are the same things we've talked about. So it'll be interesting to see what their take is.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Erica, at some point, would it be possible for you to give us a rundown of how you're doing the natural resource land methodology as well?
Yes, we were thinking of giving you a more in-depth briefing at maybe your early October meeting or your first October meeting, but we could probably do it at your next meeting if you'd like.
It's up to you. I just want to make sure that we get to see the path as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Erica. I know you guys have been really busy, and I appreciate all the hard work.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Council?
Nope. No.
All right. Moving forward, our next item will be a quick discussion. I think it's a second touch for the Orcas Landing Water System Franchise Agreement. The public hearing has been scheduled for Tuesday, September 29th. Mr. Thomas, is there anything different from what we discussed the other day?
Not necessarily. As I indicated in my original presentation, it's a fairly unique franchise agreement in that there was a precursor memorandum of understanding between the county and OLI, and that was done at the time of the Park and Ride project a few years ago. There are a couple of unique features of this franchise agreement that that stand out from our standard form of agreement, and really they're relatively minor. The term of the agreement is 25 years instead of really 15 years that we typically have. We have had a good discussion on insurance, and so with respect to insurance, OLI carries insurance, and any work that they do via a contractor, that contractor will have to be bonded and insured pursuant to L&I, so we feel like the right-of-way would be protected. The other thing that came up during our conversation last time was language that would hold the county responsible under the scenario where we have asked the OLI to move their utility so we could do work, and then if we come back within 5 years or less and ask them to move it again, that would be on our dime. I did have time to go to the CRAB website, that's the County Road Administration Board website, and they have on there a number of things, including a model franchise agreement. And in looking through that model franchise agreement, it does contain the 5-year language that Mr. Freilich talked about, I think last time when he was on the phone. So that 5-year notion isn't foreign. It does reside on the CRAB model ordinance. And so that is the only thing I think is truly unique about the proposed franchise agreement in front of you. And as Mr. Hughes indicated, this is scheduled for a public hearing on the 29th. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of a few of the discussion points that we've had on this agreement.
Great, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Stevens, do you have any questions?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Watson.
No questions this time.
All righty, thank you very much, Mr. Thomas, for the update. We will look forward to discussing this further during the public hearing. The next item is a continuation of a discussion. We at least brought the subject forward, the remaining 2020 work plan for council. If you look under tab 7, we have provided the January 31st, 2020 council retreat lineup. I think it's important for us to give direction to Mr. Thomas, or at least have a discussion between the three of us on what we would like to focus on for the remainder of the year, since a lot of our year was disrupted with COVID and other health-related issues. Mr. Stevens, is this document's what you were looking for, correct? When you?
Oh yeah, when we were talking about how to judge where we are, yeah.
Correct.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Might I suggest we, push this topic out to later in the meeting, and maybe we can deal with other agenda items that other people are on the phone waiting for?
Okay, we can do that. Wasn't sure how much time we'd take on this. That was my only reason for moving on it. Okay, so is that all right, Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, it's fine.
And so let's move to the next item. We'll circle back for item 7. The next discussion item is a resolution supporting annexation of outer islands with San Juan County Fire Protection District number 3, which would be a second touch. Public hearing is scheduled for Tuesday, October 13th at 9:15. I know, I think Mr. Jarman is on the phone, who's Fire Commissioner, and Chief Norvin Collins. Are you also on the line? All right, and Mr. Gaylord, are you present?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Randy Gaylord, San Juan County Prosecuting Attorney.
Great. So this is merely a second touch. Mr. Jarman, you had, did you want to provide any comment at this point?
Mr. Chair, if I could add one more person who's on the line who has been attending here is Mr. Bob Brunkow. And it's my understanding that he is part of the citizens group who have initiated this petition. Mr. Jarman is the member of the Fire Protection District number 3 based on San Juan Island. He's one of the commissioners.
Okay, so Mr. Gaylord, how would you suggest we move forward? Would you, are you interested in having them share public comment at this point, or?
Well, you might invite them to see if they have anything to add. Otherwise, if I could just give a brief introduction, I think that would be appropriate. The title to this matter caused some confusion at the outset when you were considering your minutes, and the title was based upon the title of the resolution from the fire district to the county council. Upon receipt of that resolution, the auditor, through the election supervisor, reviewed the petition, and that was also submitted at the same time, and the petition signatures to certify, and issued a certificate on August 21st that the 15% threshold under this election method of annexation had been satisfied. And with that action, the matter gets referred to the county council, and I prepared for you a resolution calling for an election of the people within the district, and which are precincts 15D and 15E. Those are subparts of an existing precinct, and that there be a determination that there's no special obligation or benefit for indebtedness to be charged to the property owners subject to the annexation. That resolution, a 2-page resolution plus signatures, has been presented to you. That is really the item that's here for your consideration, and I believe the request is to advance this to a public hearing. There's a requirement that the public hearing be held after publication 3 consecutive weeks in the weekly paper of record, and you would set a date that if the newspaper publication gets to the newspaper by Friday of this week, I believe that you will be able to hold the hearing in approximately 1 month.
And Mr. Gaylord, again, the question before council is to put this issue on the ballot, correct?
Yes. The issue for you is to put the matter on the ballot for a vote of the people who reside within the district to be annexed.
Mr. Watson, a follow-up question?
No, I just want to make it clear as to what the issue is that we need to take action on. Again, because I think there was some confusion in the previous meeting and in the meeting minutes and in the title that is presented in today's agenda. And I think we're talking now a spring election because we missed the November window. Correct, Mr. Gaylord?
That is correct. The November election is not possible. There was a thinking that because this came in just before the primary, that it could have been put on before the November election, but that would have required extraordinary efforts on everyone's part. It didn't get done in that amount of time. It's too late to publish it on the November ballot. So the next possible election is February.
Great.
So, Ms. Stevens, do you have a question or comment?
Well, I'm just trying, in the stuff that I received, it's just the resolution from the fire district.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had sent out the other materials to you back, and I recognize that the agenda does not include that. I can't explain that.
Ingrid, could you make sure that whatever Mr. Gaylord with his resolution is forwarded to council immediately and it gets included in this for the next part? My apologies that council does not have that. I was not aware that we had already had that. Or I missed it. Mr. Stevens, do you have anything?
No, I just want to review the actual resolution we're passing because I agree with Mr. Watson that our job is whether or not to put it on the ballot. And I just want to make sure that the outer islands are a little more defined in our resolution than they are in the fire district's resolution.
And okay, thank you, Mr. Stevens. And Mr. Gaylord, I'm very curious, has anyone reached out to the person or entity that operates or owns Spiden Island? Because this is something that's been included and I'm not sure if they have been contacted. It seemed like it was unclear in the last meeting.
All right. Yeah, that I can tell you I have not reached out to anybody. No.
Okay.
I believe they have reached out to the Spiden Island residents.
All right, Mr. Jarman, you would mind just announcing your name and...
Okay, I'm sorry. Bob Jarman, San Juan County Fire Commissioner, number 3. I believe they have reached out to the property owners on Spiden. There's only 2 big landowners on Spiden, and I don't know the status, if we ever heard back from them or not, or they ever heard back from them.
Mr. Jarman, do you know if the landowners are voters within the district? There are 2 ways to form a or to annex onto a fire district. One is known as the petition method. The other is known as the election method. The petition method goes and is based upon property ownership. The election method is based upon voters. And so, do you know if those
I don't know this. I don't know the stat. I don't know the status of the property owners, if they're voters or not. Bob Brokaw was doing the citizens group contacts and that sort of thing, trying to get things together. And I don't know if Bob is on the call, if he might have the answer to that or not.
This is Bob Brunko, 911 Marine Lane in Stewart. I have not seen any voters listed for Spiden Island.
All right,
we have two for Johns and none for Spiden, to my recollection.
All right, great. So both Mr. Jarman, well, either Bob, is there additional comment that you would like to provide?
Not at this time.
Bob Brunko here. Just in conversations with landowners and voters in the North Outer Islands, there is a strong sentiment to improve the fire support and EMS support for the Outer Islands, and they're hoping that this process will go forward.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Gaylord, any other questions from you?
No, you will need to set a date and time, and it's customary that your clerk will assist in the preparation of the notice of the hearing.
Well, just for clarification, did we not already set a public hearing for Tuesday, October 13th at 9:15 in Friday Harbor?
Yep.
I believe that was the purpose of this second touch.
No,
Mr. Gaylord, that was set on the 25th.
So we are having this meeting solely as a second touch, so we could go through our 3-touch process and had the timeliness to meet the requirements for this to go on the ballot.
All right. So I'm looking for a notice of public hearing to come from the clerk of the county council.
That'll be forthcoming, Mr. Gaylord.
Thank you.
All right, so either Mr. Watson or Mr. Stevens, you have any additional comments?
Nope.
Nope.
All right, Mr. Gaylord?
Nothing. Thank you. We'll be there on I'll attend the next meeting. I would appreciate if, from all of you, if you have any comments or suggestions for improvements to the resolution, that you get those to me as soon as you can.
And council, we will resubmit to all of council today the resolution sent by the prosecuting attorney.
Yep.
Mr. Buse,
Great, thank you.
I have sent those documents out to council via email.
All right, you should already have received the documents, council. Thank you. All right, so time check, it's 11:45. Would you like to break for lunch for an hour and come back at 45, or go through one additional subject? I feel like we're getting a little close to time that we should probably break now and then come back at 12:45. That's all right with council?
Okay with me.
Okay with me.
Great, thank you very much. It is now 11:45 or 11:44. We will recess this council meeting for Tuesday, September 15th for an hour and come back at 12. Thank you very much.